Welcome to The Assignment. We keep it raw and uncut.
This is The Assignment, and this is Miss Yaka. Let's talk about it, because I definitely feel like self-regulation needs to be taught not just to the kids, but to these adults too. So let's have a real conversation today. Is it too late to teach self-regulation? I don't think it's too late, y'all. But we have to stop confusing age with maturity. A child could be 3 years old learning how to manage frustration. And a teenager could be 16 and still struggle with anger. And an adult could be 50 years old and still not know how to calm themselves down before they react. Self-regulation is not something everybody automatically learns just because they get older. It is definitely a skill, and skills have to be taught, practiced, strengthened, and relearned. Think about a 3-year-old who falls on the floor because they can't have what they want. We don't look at that child and say, "You're bad." We teach them. We say, "I know you're upset, but I definitely need you to take a breath. Use your words. You can be angry, but you cannot hit." And that's teaching regulation. But somewhere along the way, adults are expecting to magically know how to regulate themselves. And that's where the problem begins, because some adults were never taught how to identify their emotions. Nobody taught them how to pause before responding. Nobody taught them how to communicate when they're frustrated. Nobody showed them what healthy conflict looks like. So they react. And they yell and they shut down and they curse and they lash out and they play the blame game and they become defensive and they say things that they don't mean and then have to live with the consequences. And here's the truth. Having an emotion is not the problem. What you do with that emotion is where your self-regulation comes in. You are allowed to be angry, but anger doesn't give you permission to hurt somebody. You are allowed to be frustrated, but frustration doesn't mean you get to disrespect everybody who is around you. You are allowed to cry. You are allowed to say, "I need a minute." You are allowed to walk away, breathe, pray, regroup, and come back when you are able to communicate without causing damage. And that's called what, y'all? Regulation. And let me talk to you parents. Listen to me for a second. Our children are watching us. We can tell them all day long, "Calm down." But if they watch us explode, every time something doesn't go our way, they're learning from what we demonstrate, not what we say. So maybe the lesson isn't simply teach your children to regulate. Maybe the lesson is, let's learn to regulate together. Because when your child is overwhelmed, get down on their level. Name the feeling. You're angry, you're disappointed, you're frustrated, and then you teach them what they can do with that feeling. Breathe, baby. Pause for a second. Use your words. Ask for help. Take space. Try again. And then for the adults, give yourself permission to learn those same skills. You are not too old. You are not too broken. You are not too far gone. You can learn to stop responding immediately. And you can learn to pause too. And you can learn to say, "I'm upset right now. And I don't want to say something I'll regret. I don't want to do nothing I'm going to regret." That's growth. You got to understand, in the Bible of Galatians 5:22, it talks about the fruit of the Spirit, including self-control. And that tells me self-control matters. But self-control doesn't mean pretending you don't have emotions. It means learning how to govern yourself even when those emotions are strong. And Proverbs 16:32 reminds us that being slow to anger and ruling our spirit is greater than simply winning a battle. So no, it's not too late. Not for the 3-year-old, not for the teenager, not for the parents, the teacher, the grandmother, the grandfather, not for the grown man or the grown woman who is finally realizing, "I have some emotional work to do." Start where you are. Take that breath. Count before responding. Put that doggone phone down. and lead an argument before it becomes destructive. Say what you actually feel instead of attacking somebody. Teach your children that emotions are information, not weapons. And teach yourself the same thing. Because self-regulation isn't about becoming emotionalist. It's about becoming responsible for what you do with your emotions. And if we teach our children that while they're young and continue teaching ourselves as adults, we can change generations, y'all. It's never too late. We just have to be willing to learn. Now let me take this a little deeper, and then I'm gonna get off this topic, y'all, because we need to really understand what regulation is. You know, some of us are really trying to raise emotionally healthy children while we are still carrying emotions. We never learned how to manage ourselves. And that's not an insult, y'all. That's reality. You can't teach a child to calm down while you're constantly screaming. You can't teach a child to use their words while you're communicating through insults. And you can't tell a child don't hit when you're angry, while adults are slamming doors, throwing things, threatening people, or getting physical wherever they don't get their way. Children study us, they're paying attention. So if your child is acting out, if your child is misbehaving, talking weird, talking crazy, what are you saying in front of your kids? They are watching how you handle disappointment. They are watching how you respond when somebody tells you no. And they're watching what we do when we're embarrassed. They're watching how we treat people when we're angry. And sometimes that little child isn't being bad. That child is overwhelmed. Their nervous system is saying, I don't know what to do with all of this feeling that I have inside of me. All of this information that I am downloading. What is going on? Should I act that way because my mom and my daddy is acting that way? Should I talk that way because my granny or my grandpa talks that way? Or even down to my brothers and my sisters? That's why self-regulation has to be taught before we start leading with our crazy words, our crazy deeds, our crazy actions. So, it's never too late to teach self-regulation, but we have to stop waiting for somebody else to teach us. We need to teach our own children, teach the adults, teach the teenagers. And while we're teaching them, we're going to teach ourselves, because we don't need another generation that knows how to react. We need a generation that knows how to respond. And that is the assignment, y'all. So with that being said, yes, self-regulation needs to be taught to everybody, not just the kids. And let's start practicing self-regulation. Let's start practicing self-love. Let's start practicing the way we speak, how we use our words. Because our words have what, y'all? Power. Okay? So with that being said, this is the assignment. And this is Miss Yaka. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the videos. Bye.
And that's the assignment. Teach them. Teach yourself. Birth the cycle. It's not too late.